From the headquarters of Talasio English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Sweeney Green, and a very special welcome to our viewers in Grenada. Analysts are starting to look into the true impact of U.S. President Trump's historic meeting with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. U.S. President Donald Trump and the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met in Singapore on Tuesday. This is the first time a sitting U.S. president has met with a North Korean leader. At the end of the landmark meeting, the two leaders signed a joint statement in which Kim committed to work towards the complete denuclearization of the Korean peninsula, while Trump committed to provide security guarantees to North Korea.
My meeting with Chairman Kim was honest, direct, and productive. We got to know each other well in a very confined period of time. We're prepared to start a new history, and we're ready to write a new chapter between our nations. We will be stopping the war games, which will save us a tremendous amount of money, unless and until we see that the future negotiation is not going along like it should.
Today we had a historic meeting and decided to leave the past behind, and we are about to sign a historic document. I would like to express my gratitude to President Trump for making this meeting happen.
Our correspondent in Beijing, Sierra Diaz, has more on this historic meeting.
We have witnessed a historic day in which U.S. President Donald Trump and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un signed a joint statement in which 3 points should be highlighted. The first one is that both countries commit to open a new era in their bilateral relations to favor peace and prosperity for both of their peoples. The second one is that the two nations also commit to establish a mechanism of peace and prosperity on the Korean peninsula. And the third point, one of the most important points, is that they ratified the Declaration of Panmunjom signed on April 27th, and that the Democratic Popular Republic of Korea commits to work in favor of the full denuclearization of the peninsula. And precisely that was the main goal of this meeting. Later, during a press conference, Donald Trump said that his meeting with Kim Jong-un was honest, direct, and very productive. He said that the North Korean missiles are going to be destroyed and that the U.S. sanctions against Pyongyang will continue until the elimination of weapons is verified. He also spoke about the reunification of families from the North and the South, and to finish the confrontation after the truce signed by the two Koreas in 1953. Regarding the security guarantees offered by the U.S. to North Korea, Trump said that this point is not in the agreement. That's how this historic summit concluded. Some Asian governments have already reacted. The Chinese government released a public statement through its Foreign Affairs Ministry in which it said that China is pleased about the meeting and supports the process of denuclearization and peace on the peninsula. Beijing also said it would continue in its role to support this process. The president of South Korea, Moon Jae-in, who has been active responsible for the meeting, said he was excited to see the handshake between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un at 9 in the morning Singapore local time. Moon Jae-in also said that just a meeting is not sufficient to solve the entire conflict on the peninsula, and made a call for an inter-Korean cooperation to open a new era in the relationship between the two Koreas and the United States, and to work on the long term and expand this cooperation, also with China and Russia.
On Monday in Guatemala, residents from El Rodeo had to be urgently evacuated following new mudslides. The mud flow took the same route as the lava that killed at least 114 people and left about 200 missing during the June 3rd eruption. Meanwhile, the search for the bodies of victims continues in the area now known as Ground Zero. It has been blessed by a priest as one of the last pieces of hope remaining for relatives after losing their loved ones.
In the name of the Catholic Church, in the name of His Grace, Victor Hugo, who is the bishop of this diocese, we have been given the opportunity to come bless this place. In an act of charity, with sadness in our hearts, this is really a common grave.
Our correspondent in Guatemala, Mario Rosales, brings us the latest.
The emergency in Guatemala continues. In the last few hours, there have been strong explosions that have caused the descent of volcanic waste mixed with rocks and stones that has reached highways close to the volcano. This has caused the evacuation of other communities that live close by. The police, rescue teams, and the National Coordination for Disaster Reduction of Guatemala, CONRED, that were in the disaster zone had to abandon the area. Therefore, the search of bodies will not resume and entry will not be allowed due to the amount of rocks and volcanic waste that have fallen, which could endanger the rescue teams.
Thank you, Mario, for that report. Now, the public prosecutor has opened an investigation to find out if Guatemalan authorities can be held responsible for the tragedy caused by the Fuego volcanic eruption. The aim is to determine if disaster management policies were correctly applied.
A week after the Fuego volcano's violent eruption that buried several communities in the southwest of Guatemala, thousands of survivors wonder why they were not warned and evacuated by the emergency services in time.
We got out thanks to a neighbor who was passing by his taxi and took us. He told us to leave. He said, "Look at the volcano lava. It's coming." So we left.
The public prosecutor has requested precise information to the National Coordination for Disaster Reduction in order to find out if the emergency protocols were activated on time. So far, there is nothing to show that families were told to evacuate on the morning of Sunday, June 3rd, when the Volcanology Institute issued the alert. Now dozens of families are mourning their loved ones while they await for the return of their remains.
What many families here in Colonia Los Lotes are asking for is to find the bodies of our relatives. That's the only hope we have, to find and to bury them.
There is still no precise information on how many people remain buried under the mud flow caused by the volcanic eruption. Thousands of people have lost all their belongings and now live in shelters where families are meeting each other, after days without knowing what happened to their relatives.
What we are trying to do is to reunite families again so they can support each other.
Despite widespread criticism on the government's response, President Jimmy Morales said he will not remove any official until the public prosecutor finishes its investigation. Now, the clarification of the tragedy is in the hands of justice.
We go now to Nicaragua, where opposition groups have been involved in more violence against Sandinista activists and the police. In Jinotepe, two long-standing members of the Sandinista Front, Marco Gutierrez and Guillermo Mendez, were murdered. The opposition groups also attacked a teaching hospital in Jinotepe, kidnapping 3 of the students and stripping them naked. They ransacked part of the hospital as well as the house of the mayor. On Monday, 2 policemen were killed and 3 others were kidnapped during an attack on a police station in the municipality of Mulucucu. A Facebook video showed 2 police officers in a delicate situation after being shot. That attack came as a cleanup plan was undertaken in Managua, Boacao, Sebaco, Leon, and other parts of the country. Police, along with citizens, removed obstacles from the streets, and clashes took place in various other cities. The former president of Panama, Ricardo Martinelli, who was extradited from the United States on Monday to face justice in Panama, has been transferred to a hospital after his health deteriorated. Reportedly, Martinelli entered an intensive care unit at the hospital where he's being treated for hypertension and heart disease. The former Panamanian president had been detained at El Renacer prison in the capital city, and he asked during a hearing before the court to be transferred to hospital. Martinelli is accused of ordering the surveillance of over 150 people, including journalists and politicians. Panama has also submitted an extradition request for Martinelli's son, Ricardo, and Luis Enrique, who are accused of taking $56 million in bribes from the Brazilian construction giant Odebrecht. The bizarre trial against an Argentinian former cabinet minister, Jose Lopez, has begun. Lopez is accused of tossing 160 suitcases and duffel bags filled with cash and jewelry into the garden of an old monastery outside Buenos Aires in 2016. Lopez was caught tossing the bags stuffed with $9 million, 150,000 euros, 425 yen, and 150,000 Argentinian pesos. It took the police 22 hours to count the money. Celia Inez, a 80-year-old nun, is also being charged as an accomplice, according to prosecutors. And Colombia will go to its presidential runoff election on Sunday. For more, we're being joined by Fernando Casado. Fernando is an author, analyst, and professor at the Institute of Higher Studies here in Ecuador. Fernando, thank you so much for joining us. Now, to start, I want to ask you, what do you make of the first round of presidential elections with all the claims of irregularities and potential fraud?
Hello, thank you for the invitation. Well, probably it's difficult to know the scope of the irregularities, but it seems that they pursue to prevent Petro from getting into the second round and putting Fajardo instead of him, because it seems that the establishment and the ruling class is really afraid of Petro going to the second round and having the chance of getting the presidency in Colombia. Take into account that it's the first time since Gaitán in the late 40s that a leftist candidate gets to the second round and has the chances to even get the presidency in Colombia.
Now, he has received, Gustavo Petro, a number of recent endorsements leading up to the second round. So what do you think his chances actually are on Sunday?
If you gather all the other candidates from the center and center-left in the first round, Humberto Lacalle and Sergio Fajardo, the amount of support that Petro would have is 51%. However, Sergio Fajardo and also Humberto Lacalle, the third and fourth and fifth candidate, did not expressly support Petro, and that could jeopardize his candidacy or chances for the presidency, since now there are going to be not two but three candidates for the second round, because also there is a third post for the blank vote, and since Sergio Fajardo and Humberto Lacalle has called for the blank vote, that will diminish the chances for Petro to beat Iván Duque.
Now, what do you think are the main differences between the two candidates, and how will this election affect Colombia's peace process?
Yeah, that's actually the key point in these elections, because these are two very different candidates, and the situation is right now quite polarized. Iván Duque represents the continuism of Uribism, and of course it's a right-wing party. People accuse him of being the puppet of Uribe or his protege. So what we will see with his government is probably a setback in the peace process. He says that he's not going to eliminate the process, but to modify it. And also probably he will rule for the business sector, what will means diminishing taxes and red tape. And also he is in favor of oil fracking, what we know that contaminates and is really negative for the environment. Whereas on the other hand, Petro will increase taxes. He has already said that in Colombia there is a really big problem of ownership of the land, so he will put taxes on unproductive lands and plots of lands. He will also increase probably taxes in the business sectors, since Colombia is the third most unequal country on earth, and taxes are very low in comparison with other countries in the region, and he will use those taxes in order to make social expenditures, and also of course he will promote and continue reinforcing the peace process to make it end in a successful way.
Now, Fernando, lastly, I want to ask you very quickly, what are your thoughts on Manuel Santos's announcement to formalize entry to NATO just before leaving office?
It's a very awkward decision, since NATO normally concentrates in memberships in the North Hemisphere and also in Europe. I would say that this is a way of bringing back the US and the loss of his influence in the region, especially after the peace process was completed. So in order to still have a reason to have the 7 military bases in Colombia and also have an influence on the rest of the region, Santos has finished his presidency with this very strange announcement that also could be a threat or perceived as a threat as neighbor countries as Venezuela. And since NATO membership countries are very far away from Colombia, it's weird as a decision, and probably very much it's a call of the US.
Thank you so much, Fernando Casado, for talking to us. And we are going to take a short break now, so join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, has presented her government's first budget, and it stands firm on a number of her campaign promises to improve services. Mottley spent over 2 hours delivering her speech on the budget to Parliament. Last week, the International Monetary Fund urged Barbados to cut public spending, including pensions, in order to address its high debt and deficit. Mottley promised to return the country's finances to a surplus by March of next year, but she says she will do this while protecting social spending.
So, sir, our nation stands on the brink of its biggest battle that we've had to face in our 52 years. And as I said, if we shy away from this battle now, our debt, sir, will devour us. Today, servicing our debt consumes more money than the entire central government wage bill. I want to repeat myself. Servicing Barbados's debt, our interest bill, consumes more than the entire central government wage bill.
In Grenada, the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States says they're worried about the lack of skilled labor in the region. The news comes from an investigation that showed that Grenada's construction sector needed to import labor because there was a lack of people with the skills to complete finishing touches on multi-million-dollar hotel projects.
People believe that whatever even when you are certified, that's a label you can wear on your sleeve for life. And it's not so, because knowledge is changing very quickly. As I said, technology is also accelerating the pace of change of knowledge. And so regardless of what sector you are in, you have an obligation to yourself to keep your knowledge current, to keep your skills up to date by doing continuous refresher programs and so on.
The Organization of Eastern Caribbean States will meet in St. Lucia for the 65th meeting of the OECS Authority next Monday and Tuesday. It is expected that all 10 heads of government will be in attendance to discuss matters related to climate change, trade, border security, external representation, applications for membership, and other areas of priority.
Keeps pledging money towards the SIDS.
And Jamaica's Prime Minister Andrew Holness has been invited to speak at the G20 summit in Argentina and at a special ocean summit in Oslo, Norway. Over the weekend, Holness spoke at the G7 summit in Canada about the dangers of climate change for small island states. At the G7, Holness had bilateral talks with the President of Argentina, Mauricio Macri, looking at ways of strengthening cooperation in agriculture. Holness was specially invited by President Macri and Prime Minister of Norway, Erna Solberg, to speak at their summits.
To bring to the fore the
challenges.
And a women-led community-based organization in Jamaica known as We Change is petitioning the government to raise the minimum wage by commercializing marijuana cultivation to generate income. The group wants to see the minimum wage raised to $62 a week. The current minimum wage is $48. Throughout Jamaica, there have been several consultations on the issue. The Minister of Labour and Social Security, Shaheen Robinson, is expected to announce a new national minimum wage as well as new minimum rates for private security guards when she speaks in the Parliament later today. And a delegation from the IMF will arrive in Ecuador on June 20th actually, to analyze the country's economic and fiscal policy. The organization will later present a list of recommendations for structural reforms. This comes after the authorities traveled to New York and Washington to meet with several multilateral financial organizations. It's still not known how much the IMF may loan to Ecuador, since the actual amount will depend on negotiations. And in Trinidad and Tobago, 6 religious leaders from different faiths came together to condemn any proposed advancement of LGBT rights. The Catholic Archbishop met with high-ranking members of the Hindu, Muslim and other faiths to demand from the government that there must be no amendment to the Equal Opportunities Act to accommodate LGBTQ issues, and that there must be an amendment legislation to ensure that marriage is between a biological male and female. In April, Trinidad and Tobago's court struck down a law prohibiting buggery, which many saw as a positive step in decriminalizing homosexuality.
And when 90% of your citizens are in disagreement, a silent or a very vocal minority should not be able to get an agenda through to the society.
The marriage is between a male and a female. And I will support my colleagues here in doing whatever we could to ensure that nature's law prevails.
And in Athens, the LGBTI community is holding demonstrations to celebrate Gay Pride, an event that unites people across the globe every year on June 28th.
The Sintagma Plaza is decorated with rainbows to celebrate LGBTI Pride this year. Although Greece remains a conservative country, the movement for sexual and gender rights is achieving goals that once seemed unreachable.
I think that the LGBTI movement has carried out a great struggle and has been successful in getting people to accept us much more than in years before. I transitioned in 2015 and noticed a big difference, a better difference for all people like me.
In the time since the 2017 Pride celebrations, Greece has passed a law that allows people to legally change their gender on official documents without undergoing a sex change. Another law they are contemplating is the legality for LGBTI couples to adopt children. But there is still much to do to advance the rights of this community.
So much way to be done, like for the adoptions and the political marriage. What else? Education system, it has changed, like be more open to LGBT people.
There's still discrimination.
This year's acts, along with the march, start and ends in Sintagma Plaza, where various concerts will take place later on. Although millions of people participate in the march, the Pride celebrations in Athens are not as large as those in other European cities. Unlike some Pride celebrations, the events in Athens are not as commercial and are more of a political statement. Though on a smaller scale than in other cities, some recent brand campaigns have been criticized by sectors of the LGBTI community for pinkwashing. They don't want their struggle to be taken as a capitalist advertising theme.
It doesn't matter to me if there's movement in the rights of the LGBTI community, but the rights of workers are very important. It's a very difficult situation here in Greece.
In June, other cities will celebrate diversity across the whole world, making open sexual and gender expression easier and easier as LGBTI tolerance and understanding increases.
The trouble for the 629 migrants on board the Aquarius ship has been eased slightly after the Italian government allocated 2 ships which will transport them to Valencia, Spain. On Tuesday, the Italian government agreed to provide a Coast Guard ship and a warship to transfer 500 of the migrants, and the rest will follow in the Aquarius. The voyage to Valencia will take at least 4 days. They have been stranding at sea since Sunday. The humanitarian crisis began after Italy and Malta refused to allow the Aquarius to dock in their countries, but later Spain agreed to accept them. Most of the migrants are from African countries, with more than 100 unaccompanied children and minors. The aid workers say the trip to Spain is dangerous as the vessel is overcrowded and the weather in the region has been deteriorating.
We could theoretically only do this kind of travel if we had a very limited amount of people who can be hosted and accommodated inside a protected space, so not being exposed on the open decks, because the weather conditions are expected to deteriorate significantly over the next days, and especially in unsheltered waters like we would encounter from here to Spain.
And we've come to the end of this news brief. These and many other stories, you can find them on our website at talisyourtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Talis Your English, I'm Sani Gray. Thank you so much for watching.